We're going to see what Swagkage brings to the table, see what I agree with. Obito versus Hashirama. Personally, Obito. I don't think Hashirama can actually gank Obito. I don't think it's going to happen.
How's it going, everyone? Swagkage here, and today we're going to be talking about Obito versus Hashirama. Normally, I take a look at multiple versions of both characters when I do a versus battle like this. I'd pit the most appropriate forms of each one against one another, see who comes out on top in each scenario, but I don't feel like doing that here because there are a lot of forms of Obito, and there are a handful of different Hashiramas, and not too many of them are relevant here. The ones I mainly want to focus on are Rinnegan Obito and Prime Alive Hashirama, though I may mention a couple of other versions of both characters throughout different points in the video.
This is like
I'll go ahead and say right now that unless we're talking about the really heavily nerfed Hashirama that Orochimaru brought back to fight Hiruzen, most versions of Obito don't have a chance against him. I mean, obviously, Kid Obito is like, he's completely irrelevant here, but the yellow mask Obito that fought Minato and the orange mask Obito that we see throughout the first half of Shippuden, neither of them would perform too well against Hashirama. I mean, I'm pretty sure that Hashirama stomps both of them without question. The only super relevant forms of Obito are, like I said, Rinnegan Obito and Jubito to some extent.
We have to discount Jubito.
Now, Obito has a very diverse arsenal, and he has access to a lot of tools that would give many of his potential opponents a lot of trouble. But unfortunately for him, Hashirama is extremely well equipped to deal with anything that Obito could throw at him. Let's start with Kamui because that's the core of Obito's fighting style. So as I tend to, I tweeted out the thumbnail for this video a little bit ago, and immediately everybody responded by saying, "Oh, what's Hashirama going to do against Kamui? Obito can't be touched. Obito's intangible. If Obito can't take damage, how is he supposed to lose?" And I imagine that given the fact that I have a reputation for giving Uchiha the benefit of the doubt,
if you're playing Dark Souls, if we're applying this to Dark Souls logic, so Obito is the person that has infinite health. Like, you keep hitting them with the Claymore, you're getting hits on them, like, they just don't take damage. That's effectively Obito, because he can just phase himself in and out of reality. Like, Obito is the example of the person, or even the kid, right? The kid that does one thing really, really well, and he's mediocre at everything else. But that one thing he does really well is, like, S tier. That is Obito in a nutshell. So, like, I mean, it comes down to the Dark Souls thing, right? If you can't beat him by hitting him with a sword, you have to find another way of removing him. In the Dark Souls scenario, gravity always wins. You cannot make yourself impervious to fall damage. Fall damage is the only constant in Dark Souls. You can have infinite health. You can have God mode on. Gravity does not care in Dark Souls. So, in any event, it's not even as a one-trick pony. Like, he does other things. He just does one thing really, really well, and he's kind of mediocre at everything else. So that's the thing. Hashirama, in order to actually do anything in this fight, we can give Hashirama Prime Alive. Hashirama has access to what, Shinsu Senju, Prime 10,000 hands. Yeah, my mouth is... I don't know what's going on with my mouth. That's weird. I might have to reset my model. That's a little interesting. But, like... I don't see Hashirama has to overcome that disparity. He has to overcome that damage. And I don't know what's going on with my mouth. It's bugging me. It's just one of those things that he has to find something to actually fall damage Obito, so to speak.
Versus battles like these. Many of you are under the impression that I think the exact same thing.
Closer,
but
maybe?
I don't. Kamui has a massive weakness, and it is shown time and time again throughout the manga every time Obito fights. And that is that he cannot remain intangible and damage his opponents at the same time. Let me provide an example of this weakness being exploited. During the fight against Naruto and B, Obito explains that all he has to do is touch Naruto once, and then he practically wins the fight. Almost immediately after this, he gets Naruto right where he wants him, places his palm flat on his face, then at the last second, guy shows up, attempts to hit Obito with a really hard leaf hurricane or whatever, and it forces Obito to use Kamui to avoid getting hit. Now, this is a pretty big problem for him because it's not like he can win a fight against Hashirama by just using Kamui forever. I mean, yes, it will keep Hashirama from damaging him, but it'll also keep him from damaging Hashirama. I'm also pretty sure that even if it's minimal, Kamui does have a chakra cost. Not to mention, it can only be used for a maximum of 5 minutes consecutively, so it's not like he's going to be able to do it
Senju,
forever anyway. And on the subject of chakra, there's
5 minutes.
no way that Obito has more than Hashirama. No. It's just impossible. Hashirama's chakra supply has been compared to that of Naruto's, which is already massive on its own, combined with that of one half of Kurama's. He's been shown spamming attacks that are enormous in scale, like with no hesitation at all. It's practically like he doesn't even have a limited chakra supply in the first place. The guy fought against Madara for 24 hours straight, still had enough chakra left to create a wood clone for a diversion, stabbed Madara in the back and won. This is all to say that no matter how long Obito attempts to remain on the defensive, Hashirama will be able to outlast him, and Obito will eventually be forced to at least attempt to attack him. This will expose the weakness of Kamui, but the question is whether or not Hashirama will be able to capitalize on this. I believe he could for a couple of different reasons. The first and most important is that there's not a lot in Obito's arsenal that can actually seriously damage or kill Hashirama. The guy's really durable, and he can also heal from many of the injuries he sustains, so Obito's only real shot at actually killing him is going to be through using some kind of one-shot hacks ability.
If Obito gets hit, I mean, he gets hit.
Now, you may think I've gotten a bit off topic here, but the main reason I brought this up is because both of those abilities will leave Obito exposed for at least a couple seconds. The human path's ability to extract its target's soul requires physical contact to be established for a little while, and if he attempts to suck Hashirama into the Kamui dimension, that'll also keep him from becoming intangible for a similar period of time. Even though the openings only last a few seconds, I'm pretty confident that Hashirama would be able to land a hit or two during these intervals. And it's not like Obito can change his approach after taking damage because of this. Like I said, these are two of the only ways he can realistically kill Hashirama. Something else worth mentioning is Hashirama's ability to create wood clones, and considering his gargantuan chakra supply, I doubt there's any relevant limit to how many he can put out. This is super important because, barring some filler scenes in the anime, it's been pretty consistent throughout the manga that it's impossible for anyone, regardless of whether or not they have any dojutsu to help them, to distinguish a clone apart from its creator. Even Obito specifically is shown surprised by the idea that the Naruto he was just fighting may have been a shadow clone. So if anybody tries to say, oh, you know, Obito, he's an exception, he should definitely be able to tell Hashirama apart from his clones. I mean, it's clearly shown here that he wouldn't be able to do that. Even discounting that, Madara has also flat out said he's the only person who's ever been able to tell Hashirama apart from his clones. So hopefully everybody can agree on this. Now that makes the issue that I just talked about concerning Obito's inability to remain intangible while attempting to kill Hashirama way worse. This is really bad for two reasons in particular. The first being that since he can't tell which is which, he won't know who to approach with his human path or suck you into the Kamui dimension strategy. And the second being that if he does happen to corner Hashirama's real body and ends up being on the verge of either ripping out his soul or sucking him into the Kamui dimension, as soon as his body rematerializes, one of Hashirama's clones can come in and damage it. Even on the off chance that Obito does successfully trap Hashirama's real body in the Kamui dimension, if he created any wood clones up to that point, it doesn't really matter because at best Obito's gonna get away from the fight with a tie. He'd still have all of those really powerful wood clones on the outside to deal with, and he wouldn't be able to rely on Kamui since he sucked the real Hashirama into the dimension, and whenever he attempts to phase through one of the clone's attacks, Hashirama will be able to damage his body from inside of the dimension. The outcome of Obito versus Hashirama's wood clones under these circumstances would be one of two things. Either Obito would die and Hashirama would just be stuck there forever, or Obito would realize that he can't keep fighting this way without facing a massive risk of death, and he would intentionally eject Hashirama from the dimension himself. Now, one thing that I haven't mentioned yet that many of you may be waiting for me to talk about is Obito's ability to control 6 Biju at once in this fight. And against most opponents, that would be a pretty big deal, and you'd be right to be mad at me for ignoring it for so long. However, Obito's opponent here is Hashirama, and Hashirama should be...
So the thing about the Biju is that the Ninetales is literally the conglomerate, the power level of all the other 8 in one, because he's the 9 and thus, you know, has the highest power gap. And like, sure have Hashirama fight, you know, Tails 2 through 7, right? Hashirama's just gonna like clap all of them easy, low diff.
Be able to deal with the Biju without any problems at all. He fought
against a
perfect Susano'o cloaked full-powered Ninetales and still won. Meanwhile, as many of you may remember, Naruto, who, without taking the Ninetales into consideration, should be much weaker than EMS Madara, with one half of the Nine-Tailed Fox's chakra, was able to deal with 5 of Obito's Biju at the same time with enough chakra left over to engage in a fight with Obito himself and Madara also at the same same time. Given this information, I just cannot, in good faith, argue in favor of the Biju. Hashirama should be able to deal with them as though they weren't even a problem in the first place. As a matter of fact, Obito might actually want to retract them back into the Ghetto Mazo to keep them from running away from him after Hashirama inevitably either removes the chakra rods from them or eliminates Obito's control over them using his wood release jutsu. So after this, the fight would be reduced to what I was talking about earlier. Obito attempting to either remove Hashirama's soul using the human path or suck him into the Kamui dimension, and I just don't think he'd be able to do either one of those. I mean, obviously, those aren't the only things he's capable of doing. He could obviously use other techniques to set up a scenario where he might be able to take Hashirama out with one of those two, but I can't see it happening because of how much of a monster Hashirama is. Obito would have to deal with multiple wood golems, the giant hands erupting from the ground, the bringer of darkness genjutsu, and last but not least, the Shin Su Senju, or the wood release true several thousand hands technique that Hashirama can just drop to practically end the battle at any time. I would say that Obito could use the Rinnegan in creative ways to catch Hashirama by surprise at various points throughout the fight, but Hashirama is apparently familiar with at least one of the Rinnegan's techniques already. Now, just because he recognized the ghetto art of Rinne Rebirth, it doesn't mean he has complete full knowledge on all of the Rinnegan's powers, but it is a possibility worth taking into account, and I think it'd make things even harder for Obito than they already are. The last possible thing that I could think to bring up in Obito's favor is the fact that maybe he's faster because he's fought with Minato before, and he fought with KCM Naruto before, and he was able to keep up with both of them. But then again, a weakened Edo Tensei Madara was also shown reacting pretty easily to KCM2 Naruto's attacks, and Hashirama was never implied to have any trouble keeping up with Madara's speed during their mini-fight, so it's a bit tough to argue that Obito's the faster of the two here. Also, Hashirama has a bunch of crazy speed feats of his own, like here where he reacts to a tailed beast bomb being fired from really close behind him. This is all without the aid of Sage Mode, by the way. He notices it, turns around, weaves the summoning jutsu hand seals, and successfully summons 5 Rashomon walls to protect himself. And I'm gonna repeat it, this was in base without the aid of Sage Mode. I mean, in all honesty, I can't even see Obito beating Edo Hashirama. The guy's just way too powerful, and I can't think of any convincing arguments in Obito's favor. Jubito, on the other hand, completely different story. I won't spend too much time on this since I think the answer's pretty obvious, but like Hashirama takes one look at uncontrolled, destabilized, like baby mode Jubito, and he goes, that guy's stronger than I am. Full power, like 6 paths Jubito with the truth-seeking orbs and the ability to fly and everything, he'd probably tear Hashirama apart. Well, I don't think that's fair. Hashirama would probably put up a decent fight, but there's absolutely no way he'd be able to take Jubito out. The 6 Crimson Rays formation would come out, and that'd be the end of the fight. I can't think of anything that Hashirama could do to survive that. Maybe I'll make another video in the future about Hashirama versus Jubito, exploring the topic more in depth, but for now I'm just gonna leave it at that. Anyway, thanks as always for watching the video all the way to the end. Make sure to leave your thoughts on both who you think would win and the video in the comments below, and if you have any ideas for future topics you'd like me to cover, include them in your comment as well. Thanks once again, hope you guys have a great rest of the day, and until my next video, I'll talk to you later. Swagkage out. Bye.
No, Swag brought a lot of good things to the table. I have to concede to him. He brings good points. That actually changed my mind on that. I was in full favor of Obito, but with the points he brings, like, sure, intangibility is a factor, Kamui is a factor, but like, no, like no, that's fair. That is completely fair. I'll concede to Hashirama.